of the clinical trials. And so you can imagine what does this mean if we are really able to reduce by 50% the risk of a drug discovery project. This has, of course, an impact on the pharmaceutical companies, but also on our healthcare systems, right? Because part of the costs of our healthcare system is based on the cost of the drugs. So this is what we are trying to do at Invirtuo Labs. We established company last year, and as we mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we closed our fundraising a few months ago. So we started really the phase of the development of our platform 2-3 months ago, 4 months ago, beginning of January. So the idea is to build a virtual laboratory, so a laboratory able to address most of the tasks for the discovery phase of novel molecules, but virtually, so applying machine learning, but as we will see also molecular simulations and generative chemistry. And the challenge here is that, sorry guys, because I cannot see you. Okay. So the challenge here, in particular in the field of drug design, of course, this is true also in other fields, but in particular for drug development, it's a scarcity and low quality of data points. So imagine you want to develop a drug, which means that you should be able to predict toxicity, efficacy of a potential molecule, but also a huge number of other properties like the adsorption, distribution, metabolism, extraction, and so on. But then you need data, right? And so in some cases, you don't even have one data point. So this is the most important challenge in this field. And that's why we address this point, because we are able to train our model not only on experimental tests, but also generating synthetic data from molecular simulations, computational simulations. That's why we have these 3 different pillars. So from one side, Invirtuo, which is molecular machine learning. So machine learning applied to predict the properties we were talking about a couple of minutes ago. Then generative chemistry. I will spend a few words about this in a few seconds. But the aim of generative chemistry is to explore the chemical universe. Just to give you an idea, there are more potential drug-like molecules out there than atoms in the universe. So someone tried to this calculation is like 10 to the power of 60, so it's huge. And our ability to properly explore in an optimal way the chemical space is extremely important, in particular to develop molecules far from IP protected region of the chemical space. And then we have molecular simulation. So the idea with molecular simulation, this is a completely different approach. It's not data-driven, and it's an approach that is able to generate data. For example, you have here three-dimensional representation of a protein and then a drug or a potential drug. And we are able to actually simulate how the strength of the interaction between a drug and the protein, which is then related with the activity and the efficacy of this molecule. And so starting from January, we have built this platform able to run like more than 60,000 so-called molecular docking experiments. So this kind of experiments, you estimate the strength of the interaction between the protein and a pharmacological target and a potential drug. And this is a quite like complex platform, because you need to build parameters for this kind of simulations for each protein and for each drug. You have different parameterization schemes, and then you have to combine different softwares. And of course, you have to leverage GPUs, and you need to perform this in a kind of parallel framework. And so this is what we did at the beginning this year, thanks to Stefano, one of our co-founders, and he is really extremely skilled when it comes to molecular simulations, and this is what it did within the first months. And as you can see there, this is the typical fun. Of course, guys, interrupt me whenever you want. It's, I think, more it's a chat more than a formal presentation. So if you have any questions, just let me know. This is the typical funnel-like mechanism of a drug design project. So at the beginning, you have millions, in this case, billions of potential compounds. And of course, you can consider data set that you can find out there containing molecules, billions of molecules, or you can leverage generative chemistry. And I'm going to explain how we can do this. Then after this process, usually, as I've mentioned, you are interested in performing the so-called ADMET property prediction. ADMET means adsorption, distribution, metabolism, extraction, and toxicity. And these are like typical the so-called local molecular machine learning models. So you have a data set, you train your model, and then you just perform predictions. And based on these predictions, then you filter out molecules for toxicity and again, adsorption or other reasons. And then leveraging molecular simulations. So what we have seen in the previous slide, we can actually understand the reasons and the molecular details about the interaction between pharmacological target and the ligand, which means the potential drug. And at the end of this process, of course, you have to analyze with this kind of virtual microscope the interactions between molecules and pharmacological target with this three-dimensional visual inspection. So this is the platform that we are building, the purely technological platform, and behind each module, so behind the generative layer that you can see on top of this funnel, as you can imagine, there are like tens of potential molecules that we have to train in-house, and this is true for all the layers that you see there. So when it comes to ADMET, we have our own proprietary machine learning model for toxicity prediction, and then for protein ligand interaction prediction, and so on. So you have this multiple layers in this funnel-like process.
Gianvito,
yeah, please.
I'm really not coming from this domain, so that's a very beginner question. When you generate these molecules, I think the probabilities are endless, right? There's endless amount of molecules that can be generated.
Yeah.
So you kind of almost generate them like in, let's say, with generative AI, and then you kind of every day generate more and more, and then you apply your machine learning to see which molecules will be filtered out for toxicity, and like and that is where your kind of layer is, right? That's one of the most important layers.
Yeah, yes, it's absolutely true. So this is the way generative AI and generative chemistry can be applied. It's an interesting question. Let me just jump, because I think it's really important. So this is the way that generative chemistry can be applied for the so-called de novo generation, which means generating molecules just randomly, which is interesting because then you can apply like the filters we were talking about, as you've mentioned. Okay, probably it's not the smartest approach that we can apply, because it's like, I mean, if we consider like these methods as GPT or any other LLM in the field of natural language, it's more or less as ChatGPT talking without any question, right? So just writing text, it's more or less the same. So you have a model, and it just generates molecules, random molecules. So I think probably we can do something a little bit smarter, and that's why we have built this so-called fragment constraint models. So in the same way you use prompt in your GPT model, you can think about, for example, and this happens quite often in an applied drug discovery project, you already have an idea of an active molecule, an active region of a certain molecule, like this one, for example. This is just a part of this molecule. And so you want to use this chemical entity as a prompt for the generation, okay? This seems to be super easy because if you train, for example, a next token prediction architecture, then you can just leverage the prompting mechanism and you have the fragment constraint generation. Well, in chemistry, it's not true for several technical reasons. I don't want to bother you with this, but just to super quickly, it's almost impossible, or there is not always possible to project in one-dimensional space something which is three-dimensional. And that's why there is not always a way to write at the beginning of the chemical sentence what you are interested in. Again, so there are a number of technical reasons. So that's why we have built this new chemical notation able to generate fragments of molecules, as you can see here. So this is the first fragment, and you have the second fragment here. And so we have trained our model on these different chemical notations so that we can leverage the prompting mechanism of these chemical language models. So our model,
very smart. And an analogy to our domain is you can predict weather. We're doing weather forecasting and AI weather forecasting, and the weather can turn out to, if you let it go, just as you said in the chemical world, if you let it go, let's say the wind speed could be -20, which doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
Let it generate. But then you say you apply physics constraints. So your fragment constraints becomes our physics constraints. So we have physics-informed neural networks. The PIN.
Oh, so these are PIN. Okay.
Yeah, the PIN is a very similar idea because you have to constrain the system so that it doesn't leave the physics space. Yeah. And what you're doing, the fragment constraint, I really like, and I understand that. It's kind of resembling, and it's a really cool idea.
Yeah. So the physics-informed is a super interesting field. I have applied PINs before as a researcher. It's super interesting. In this, yes, the idea behind is exactly the same. So you're applying, and that's why it's fragment constrained. In this case, there isn't any, because the architecture is really as any other GPT-like architecture. So without any physics behind, we are just applying the prompting mechanism of any other GPT architecture, but the way we write down chemistry is chemistry informed in a way, because if you are able to create two fragments from just one molecule, then you should be able to rebuild the whole molecule after the generation. And this means that you are informing your model about how fragments are linked together. And I mean, it's interesting your comment, because then this is one of the differences between fragment constraint generative models and de novo models, because the quality and the synthetic, the chemical accessibility of these molecules are higher when you train a fragment constraint model. And because your model is has been able to actually learn the chemistry behind. So in a way, it's chemistry informed, let me say. Then, as usually for these foundational model, you can use latent space to perform molecular property prediction. So then you have a molecule as input, and you can leverage the latent space, so the numbers that you have in the latent space, to actually train downstream a number of models for performing toxicity prediction, absorption. This is the advantage, another advantage of using chemical language models. And last point, because I have presented this slide trying to address your previous question, because you said something about the random generation of molecules. The other advantage, this is probably the most important point, is the ability to generate molecules tailored for a specific receptor. So you're not just sampling chemical space as in any other data set, but you can really tailor your generation, in particular for fragment constraint generation. You can really tailor your generation with respect to pharmacological target. And you can do this several ways, applying reinforcement learning downstream, or just optimizing the generation, because again, we are generating fragment by fragment our molecule. So we can really optimize the generation using a number of heuristics or algorithms. And this is super important. And we have been able, I'm quite proud of it, we have been able to develop this model, which is state of the art if compared with one of the model developed by NVIDIA a couple of months ago, which was like the best model out there so far. And usually, as this also happens in the field of LLMs, of course, we have a number of metrics benchmark to demonstrate the performance of these models, usually in terms of validity. And as you can imagine, the percentage of valid molecules generated by the chemical language model. And then the diversity, again, the higher the chemical diversity, the better your model, because it means that it's able to, given a certain validity, it is able to explore deeper the chemical space. Uniqueness, of course, we want as much unique molecules as possible. And then quality. Quality is related to the chemical complexity of the molecules, because this is one of the main limitations of chemical language models. It's similar to the hallucination problem that you have with LLMs, in LLMs in natural language. So you generate molecules, but then it's extremely difficult, which means also expensive, to actually synthesize these molecules. So the higher the quality, the lower, let me say, it's not 100% true, but the lower the cost of the actual development of the molecules. So this is a more an overview of the different metrics, and because then it's important to evaluate the ratio and the right trade-off between quality and diversity, and the optimal behavior in this plot is like top right here, and so our model, the blue one, is better than NVIDIA model in almost all the different tasks. So we are also applying, as I said at the beginning, we are also applying these models in internal applied drug discovery project. So we have our internal proprietary pipeline of drug design, and with a couple of projects focused on neurological disorders, then oncology and metabolic disorder. And these projects are on the same pharmacological target, and we are going to start really soon testing the first batch of molecules for this target. I hope within the next couple of 2-3 weeks. So we will be able to give you, I hope, update quite soon about our first predicted molecules. This is just an overview of our team. As I said, I presented the results when it comes to the methodological platform with molecular simulations performed by Stefano. And then our team brings together not only machine learning researchers, but also like experts coming from different fields, in particular from the pharma industry, with more than 30 years of expertise in preclinical development of drugs, and also venture building. This is the tech team I'm also proudly part of. And Benno is the expert of generative chemistry, and the results that I have presented when it comes to the generative model for chemistry, he's been able to obtain most of the results that you have seen in really just a few months. So he really did a great job. This is a super brief overview. I think was more or less in time as expected, I hope. But if you have any question or just curiosity, more than happy to answer.
Yeah, very interesting. Very, very interesting. I mean, one of the goals that you kind of mentioned over and over is the reducing of the search space, right? So we have to reduce the search space, and we have to do it efficiently and in the best way. And you also want to kind of, you said you're interested in certain type of chemicals or certain type of domain, so you really want to get random results in that domain only, so you can work on that. Okay, that's the I've never seen that being a problem before in our field, so that's very interesting. But yeah, that makes
this is I think a peculiar aspect of the chemical field. The chemical universe is really huge, and that's why if you start, for example, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we started in the field of the research field. We started using at the beginning millions and then billions of compounds, and it's a good idea. These are the so-called ultra large chemical libraries. But then again, machine learning in general in the inference phase is relatively fast. But if you need to apply molecular simulations, so like the methods that I have presented at the beginning, takes time. I mean, with one, because here you have molecular docking, then you can perform more complex and expensive, computationally expensive simulation, and it takes time. With one GPU, you can spend like 12 hours or 1 day just for one simulation of a potential drug against a certain pharmacological receptor. So it's extremely important to reduce as much as possible the number of even computational experiments that you have to perform. And that's why you have to search in the optimal way, and you have to explore in the optimal way the chemical space. So this is still a challenge. And the other challenge, as you can imagine, this model, this one has been trained on chemical text, and so on the language of life, which is chemistry. But molecules are multimodal by definition. They have multiple modalities because molecules are chemical notations, but they also have a three-dimensional structure, so they can be represented by graphs, and they are the result of chemical reaction. And by the way, there is more than just one chemical notation. So they have multiple modalities. So trying to integrate these modalities in the generative models for chemistry, this is the next, I think, frontier when it comes to the research in this field.
Sounds exciting, very exciting.
I have a question actually.
Yeah.
What's the expected speed up from 10 years to what you're expecting? What's your idea?
Yeah, really good point, because I didn't mention this, and this is probably the only parameter that actually matters, right? Because then at the end of the day, we would be happy to reduce as much as possible time and cost of this process. And so we have multiple phases, right? Because at the beginning in a drug discovery process, you have discovery, preclinical, and then clinical phases. When it comes to time and the potential impact of these techniques in reducing time as much as possible, this is true in the discovery phase. But then, as you can imagine, in the clinical, by like 50% or more, but the discovery phase is just less than 10% of the whole process. So I think the actual impact here is in terms of the success rate of the whole process. And the impact seems to be huge because we already had, as I said at the beginning, we already have preliminary data about the potential impact. And it seems that AI-driven drug discovery seems to be like 100% more successful than the average in the historic average in this industry. And I think, to be honest, of course, these are preliminary numbers based on just a few tens of molecules that currently we have in phase 2 trials. But we have also to consider that these molecules have been developed like 10 years ago, when we were really at the beginning of the AI revolution, in particular in the field of drug design. So I think this number, 100% increasing success rate, I think it's feasible, it's reliable. Probably it will be much more than this, and this means 50% reduction of costs. I mean, in this field, again, it takes 2 billion to develop one molecule. So I think this is the actual value of machine learning in this field.
Great point.
Any other?
I mean, from my point, what I find interesting is that they've taken a new technique, what is new for us, maybe not for the LLMs, but thought about how to apply this technique in what at the initial point was very unorthodox. Let's, if it can do sentences, could it also not do chemical formulas? And so we trained the model on these sort of chemical sentences, and slowly it starts getting a sense of what should follow what, this type of idea. And I think going forward, there's going to be more of this. I mean, once a technique works in a field, it may be an opportunity to explore where else can it be used in this sense as well. So we know, yes, there are hallucination problems, but again, they're not just relying on this. This is one part of 3 right now that they've developed. And so it provides a good enough short list from which they can work with. And so it helps narrow down the space. So I guess the question for all of us is, as some of these techniques become more widespread, and maybe some of the frontier models, they say, become more all-encompassing. Maybe the future ChatGPT will also have a chemical model in there, Gianvito, because they also train it on this. I mean, they are increasingly going in that direction. The whole AGI debate is about, is it going to be many multiple smart models, or is it going to be one huge model which encompasses both coding and chemistry and molecules and physics and whatever? Who knows? I mean, we don't know which way this will go. So my challenge kind of for all of us is to say, how else can we use the tools that are now coming out there? I mean, there's the way we're using them now, because that seems to be the way to use it. But how else can we use them, both at the model level as well as at the agent level that's developing, and what creative and original ways could we apply some of this new capacity in our work in our respective companies? But it's sort of these types of thoughts that I find interesting, and so I'm a big fan of what Gianvito is doing, and he has a lot of work ahead of him, but there's a lot of originality in his thinking, which I respected, as it is in all of your companies, and so sharing originality, I'm hoping, kind of spurs more originality, because ultimately that's where value in startups come from.
Thank you very much. I will comment just a couple of words, because it's interesting what you said, and this is also something extremely important for us, because the question that I usually receive, probably guys, this is also in common with you, I don't know, but usually we receive these kind of questions. So what if OpenAI, or again Nvidia, or other huge companies start doing what you are actually doing right now, and which is the expected impact of this in your field? And so I mean, it's a long story, but I think, a long story short, we have seen the result. I mean, just in a few months, it's just the beginning of a long journey. It's just the first of the models that we are going to develop within the next year. But we have seen the results that we got when it comes to the chemical language model. And the question is, why? I mean, we've been able to beat Nvidia. And how is this possible? I mean, they are at least as smart as we are. They are a huge company. So I think the reason is that we still have a bottleneck out there when it comes to data. At least this is true in our field. And when it comes to integrating data of different nature, and it's much more difficult for like a big tech company. But of course, it's still the beginning, and I think this revolution is just the beginning. Probably they are investing a lot in companies, in startup companies, and even hiring extremely skilled person. But I think there is still a bottleneck there. Because just to give you an example, LLMs in the natural language, you have like hundreds of billions of parameters. And in the model that I have presented, state of the art is 80 million parameter. Why? Well, because we don't have data. And so that's, I think, the key point. As soon as we have data, I think the challenge would be much, much bigger. And that's why, and I conclude that I think 5 years ago was probably too early to really apply AI for drug discovery. In 5 years, it'll be too late, probably, or too expensive to enter this market, because then we will have these kind of companies with huge architecture and data. So yeah, this is what I think about this.
I mean, data, I've heard both from Güven and you, Barış, as you see that also as a key differentiator long term in terms of unique data access, what you're offering to the market right now. Güven, in terms of your weather forecast, that you are using unique data access from your clients, as well as maybe some other sources that you're planning in the future. And that was always one of your original pitches, I remember, to me, that you know, we think we can differentiate us around data. And Barış, also with Cocktail, we've been talking about how data could be hugely valuable, that what you're collecting about parents and their behavior, what their preferences are, and all these, you know, so data does definitely seem to be an interesting area for us to think about. One topic we've had, you know, with Barış, we talked about how maybe some of the big companies may eventually want to buy, for example, you or Güven, you as well, just to get access to your data. You know, forget about your models, but hey, Gianvito, you've got some amazing chemical data here. Forget about your models, but we want the data and we're going to buy you. So that in itself also could be long-term motivation. I mean, whether you guys want to monetize that or not, that's a separate discussion. But just I think that highlights this whole idea. Data is hugely valuable, and maybe with AI to also have a data strategy to keep yourself differentiated. So as they maybe reach your level, what's your strategy to be one step ahead and thus be able to do it? So this maybe is a part of all of our success strategies in this space. Now,
with the Google I/O happening a few days ago, I think this is usually the key takeaway. Like these guys are gonna like destroy startups, but if you have your own data, and if you have, you have to, your differentiation factor is becoming more towards data, proprietary data, and that's the case. We can't compete, like same with Gianvito, we can't compete with NVIDIA, not NVIDIA, but Google on weather forecast, AI weather forecasting models, the foundational models ourselves. We don't have the GPU compute, we can't generate a global forecast model, but we have different ways to differentiate, like with our own data or building applications on top or unlocking some other kind of let's say problems in the domain. We have to find a differentiation factor there. Otherwise, it's just.
But can you deep dive a bit, because of course it's not my field, but how does it work when it comes to your field? So data is, first of all, how challenging it is to train these kind of models, and how big is the amount of data needed in order to address this? And
yeah, I can't compare with the science, I mean, your domain, but the data is like multi-dimensional and it's very, very huge. So imagine being able to know every kind of weather forecast, weather parameter all around the world in like centimeters squared. Like you know, like 10 meters above there's a different wind, and 10 meters above there's a different pressure. We have the same problem as you. We can't observe the world as much as we want to. So the observation data is very limited. So that's why it's like gold mining, like you go and like get observational data as much as possible. And with better observational data, you get better weather forecast.
But are these data available like open source or?
Some yes, but not all. And that's why like Tomorrow.io, like our competitor in the US, is launching satellites. It's funny, they launch satellites just to get satellite data. We go and do B2B customer agreements, and we get like wind energy turbines, like wind data, or like we go with EV companies and we ask the car data, so that we constantly get more observational kind of data from the Earth at a real time. And that really kind of makes the factor your model did stand out.
Okay.
Similar domain in that sense. Yeah, the data, vast amount of data is kind of similar.
Yeah. Interesting.
When you were doing your presentation, two startups came to mind that I mean I linked in my head. One of them is it's less relevant, but Syntho.ai. Syntho. They are synthetic data generation company.
Oh, yeah.
All they do. I think there's a lot of these, but your domain is really like niche, so I'm not sure they can do that in your domain. But there's some few startups which I saw like last week in Berlin. There was a Deep Tech Berlin conference. We were there. I think it's a good fit, by the way, for you guys. A lot of bio companies were there. A lot of space companies were there. And yeah, that Syntho.ai was the good one, where they generate synthetic data according to your needs. But I mean, it's kind of relevant. The other one was you feed in data. I couldn't find the name, but you feed in data and it does scientific discovery out of that data. The data itself has to be scientific, and then it takes insights, I mean, probably later in presentations, but it generates insights for you that you can use. I think this is a well-known startup, a better-known startup. I'll find it. And they won the award in Deep Tech in Berlin. They really, they're very science oriented, and there's applications that are huge.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really useful, interesting. In particular, I think the point of synthetic data can be applied in several fields. I think it's another key point is that of the next few years, at least in my opinion, for sure in the field of drug design. But in general, I think it's interesting. And then usually I have to take a look because I don't remember the company that you've mentioned. I have to take a look. Usually when you hear synthetic data, usually these models these are like LLM kind of models. And in this case, that's why when I explain my project and I say synthetic data, then the answer is, well, so you are using LLMs. Well, it's a little bit different because in our case, we use a completely different method. So molecular simulation to generate data points. But in general, I think, yes, it's super interesting. So the field of synthetic data generation is extremely important for training.
I guess in places in business context, it could work too. I mean, when there's less data, that you don't have enough data, and let's say you want to like discover kind of extreme or rare kind of scenarios, and they generate really nice data for you, that could work too. But yeah, it's interesting. It's so like focused startups that just generate.
Yeah, I mean, I think synthetic data is very interesting. I remember reading when DeepSeek came out, they seem to use quote unquote synthetic data, but what it seems to have emerged that they were using either ChatGPT or Llama as a source to generate the synthetic data. So, create certain connections for us, which we can use to train our model using reinforcement learning. And so having another model as a basis from which you can generate it, I think that's key. But then you need to make sure that model is somehow either superior or relevant. I guess that's the challenge there, I think. And then another topic that's sort of related to that, this idea of distillation, model distillations, I also find interesting, where maybe running a big model is expensive, Givan, and eventually you may need to have a macro model somewhere. But for speedy customer, on the field or on the edge results, you may create distilled models which run much faster and are much cheaper, which you could deploy, locally or something like that to do it. So this effort of having, one big model which kind of feeds smaller models either through synthetic data training, and you can use it for that, or for distillation purposes. That seems to be some potential trend there as well. Maybe there is an AGI someday, but maybe we can use that AGI to distill relevant submodels for ourselves, for our respective domains that could be relevant for us. And if we do that in just the right way, that's better than everybody else. That too could potentially give us an advantage. So that was just like another thought that occurred to me listening to you guys.
Yeah.
Distillation sounds like something we're gonna be doing in the weather generator project, which today maybe we don't have time, but I'll do another session just to explain that. We're doing a Horizon project, Gianvito, with world's kind of, I mean, Europe's best kind of meteorology centers, and we'll be doing a generative model on weather, a huge like a foundational model, and then we'll be applying. We're writing an application on top, meaning like we're gonna apply it to wind and solar forecasting. And there, I think doing the model distillation that Sape has mentioned, the large model is there. We're not gonna like actually develop it ourselves, but the consortium project will. And then we'll do applied fine tuning on the outputs of that, and then we're gonna fine tune it to apply it for the solar energy forecasting. So with so
Okay.
what we're gonna do, it's very exciting. Next week we'll be in Zurich, like close to you.
Oh.
There's a really nice AI weather forecasting conference.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, that's very like AI and weather oriented. It's really, really cool. And then we're gonna have a hackathon in this project, Horizon project, again in Bonn, Germany, this time in August, where we're gonna like have prototype and then see if we can get that. So.
But can I ask you, because I have a curiosity about the business model of like companies in your field, and then related to the business model, how big is this market?
Yeah, business model. I mean, yeah, as I said, doing global forecasting is like a commodity. Like you can open your phone and you'll get forecasts for everywhere, right? Then that's why we struggled in the first 2 years. Not struggled, but like we kind of looked around which industries like this is financially kind of makes sense. And then two industries for us are really like convincing right now. Aviation, I mean transportation in general, and aviation more specifically. There's a lot of like financial value in knowing how the visibility will look like, or airport closure, takeoff, detours. We kind of have a kind of AI that lets the dispatchers decide, okay, the plane should land right now, they should do a detour, and that's really the application area, and there's a lot of financial value. And the other one is renewable energy, which is I think the best, I mean the easiest one, where if you can predict tomorrow how much solar and wind energy that will be there, you know how much energy you're going to be producing, and then that way you don't get fines. Otherwise you get fines. You have to forecast constantly how much you're going to be producing, and the governments fine you if you don't forecast correctly. So you really have to know exactly how much megawatt hours you're going to be producing, and that's really the energy market is completely revolving around weather right now, because it's very unstable. It's not like nuclear or like hydro where you know exactly.
Yeah.
So the stability is a lot, instability is a lot in the energy domain, and that's why we kind of do the second later.
Yeah, okay. And sorry, I have a follow-up question on this because it's really interesting. But is there any unmet need that we currently have? I mean, again, I'm out of this field. I'm not an expert in this field, so it seems to me that okay, we already have methods out there able to again predict weather in a kind of reliable way. So is there any unmet need that we can actually address with AI like today, what we didn't, we couldn't like 5 years ago, and
exactly.
Which is the impact of this in terms of value generated for this market?
Exactly. So you actually asked the question that a lot of people ask: what's the added value of knowing the weather?
Yes.
A little bit, like what does it give me?
Yeah.
The good thing is in renewable energy, there's direct consequences. So if you know the weather 0.1 degrees better, you directly get, let's say, $100, 100,000 euros kind of counterpart, because that 0.1% affects your solar production, and that's how you kind of break this directly. I mean, if you do 0.01% increase in accuracy, that translates into dollars.
Oh,
so
wow.
that's
Okay.
perfectly well. And for aviation, I mean, of course, it's harder to do that, but there's a lot of I think way to go, because we're not really good at weather forecasting, and this is a chaotic system, and there's like not enough observational data. There's a chaos, and then you have to do your best, and we're gonna get much better. I mean, science itself, I mean, not us, but the science itself will make it much better, but we're still far away because the observational data is still lacking, and we're doing imperfect forecasts still, but much better than 50 years ago. And we'll be in 10 or 15 years, I think we're gonna be unlocking most of the problems. Accuracies will go a lot higher. And yeah, AI will also, I mean, be a trigger here, because right now what we're using is physics, completely physics and math solve, which is okay, but I mean, yeah, it's not relying on data. It's more like science and physics. So yeah, we'll see. That's why you have and you have to also do the foundation. It's like a huge domain, like yours. I mean, but,
Sorry, guys, I've got to hop on another call. Please feel free to continue. But thank you, Gianvito. Great.
Bye. Thank you very much.
And yeah, great. I think these are great discussions, and I look forward to more. And also this the EU project that Güven's working on, that might be interesting. Just the process they went through, Gianvito, for you. It's a Horizon project. I know you're interested in medium term and such things as well, and so maybe also hear his experience, pluses and minuses, etc. So
yeah, absolutely.
For you.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you guys now finally met each other, and yeah, please do continue. And Zurich and Lugano are 2 hours. It's a fast train. I just did it, Güven. It's a great ride. So you want to hop down to Lugano, or just meet up midway? Feel free to do that.
Yeah.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, where's?
Güven, my question is, if we are going to be very accurate in 10 to 15 years, can you compare it with the accuracy of Back to the Future prediction of 2015?
What was it? 2015 was
in 2015 they were like looking at the watch. Oh, there's 10 seconds more rain, and then it will stop, and it stopped.
We are already there. You know this domain better than me, but it's like the F1 domain. They're already there. They know like in 10 seconds the rain is gonna come and go. They already have that unlocked, and they did it. I think the goal will be longer horizons. Like, we know in 30 days in advance what's gonna happen. So we were doing really well in the first 7 days. We're 5 days already, but can we do it for the next 30 days? I mean, in a chaotic system, that's very hard.
Yeah, that's the point. I think this is the question that I have. Why is that challenging? So which is the reason? So because is there any external? And of course, it's a chaotic system. And because it's a kind of surprising to me that we are not even able to predict, like in some cases, like just for tomorrow, the actual in a reliable way. So which is the main reason behind this?
See you on
Bye.
So currently how the weather forecasting is done is you take currently what's there. So you take the observation at T0. You put all the kind of data from the world, and okay, right now Earth's state is this. This is the best of Earth we know. And then you kind of run a simulation of T1, and then T2. So based on T1, T2, based on T3, T2, and we go, and then the disturbance, like the system gets distorted pretty badly. So because you rely on a system, the autoregressive model, so you rely on the previous R, but that's already a forecast as well. So that numbers kind of really build up, and then in 20 days you almost get a random system. Like, it's better. For 20 days, it's almost like you don't get a forecast. So that's the way it's done. That's why. So the physics approaches, that's the limitation. But with AI, and purely relying on data, will be much better there, because we're going to be relying on data instead of like the manual distortion of the data. So
or combining two approaches.
Usually it's combination. Yeah. We're looking forward to that.
We are more lucky in that sense because we look backwards in the data.
True, exactly. For the horizon, Gianvito, I mean, yeah, we were kind of we got close to the Europe's like weather forecasting agency, CNWF. They're the best. They're intergovernmental and they're huge. And they kind of picked us up, and then we had chats, and then we applied together for a Horizon project. It's the 16 million euro project.
Okay. Do you remember which framework of the Horizon project was this one?
Horizon Tech, what was it? It's for climate. But what are the domains there? What are the kind of
so, but you directly received funds, so it was not a staff exchange project, or so you just directly received funds. Okay, yeah. Probably within the Marie Curie framework, probably.
It's digital. I think it's a digital twin overall Europe. Digital.
Okay, maybe.
Only one part of this is a small part. That's a 4 billion euros project, and this is only like a small part. We're trying to replicate the Earth and weather systems and climate systems. And yeah, I mean, application was smooth for us because the CNWF was taken care of. We just do our parts. Kind of we were lucky there, but I know that it's a huge pain to apply for Horizon projects, and it's much fun. And I think have you guys applied?
No, I mean we are. I've been doing research for many years, so I know how painful it is to apply for scientific projects, and this is something we are thinking about. That's why, and we also discussed this with Esat. That's why he said that it's interesting for us. Of course, here in Switzerland we have specific institutions and another framework which is called InnoSwiss. It's more or less the same. They provide support to companies and also research institutions for like science-based project ideas. And then we can also apply starting from this year, by the way, to a European project as partners, formal partners. And so we have the first call like in September, the Eurostar framework, which is interesting for us because it aligns quite well with the drug design project in preliminary phases. But then, it's a matter of trade-off between the cost of writing proposal and also the management of the project and the success rate, the probability to actually get funds. And if you write like more than 1-2 projects, then it's it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Okay, guys.
Thanks a lot, Gianvito. Very nice
meeting you. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to meet you, and I hope to meet you in person.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
See you in Turkey.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.